Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. Today we are going to be diving into something pretty intense. We're going to be talking about online romance scams.
Ooh.
You guys sent us a ton of stuff about catfishing and the psychology behind these scams. And, well, we're here to figure out what really matters.
That's right.
Now, maybe you're here because you're worried about someone you know.
Right.
Maybe you just want to know more just in case.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you're like me and you're just fascinated by, the dark side of human behavior.
Absolutely.
But whatever your reason, stick with us because we're going to give you the tools to really understand these scams, how they can hurt people, and most importantly, how to stay safe.
You hit the nail on the head. We're not just talking about empty wallets. We're talking about broken hearts.
Right.
These scams, they prey on our need to connect with others. It can be absolutely devastating.
I mean, that makes sense. We all crave connection.
Exactly. And what's really interesting to me is how these scammers, they use the internet to manipulate people. It's not just fake photos and made-up profiles. They create entire fake worlds to trick their victims. They tailor everything to match exactly what their targets are looking for.
So it's like they're building a custom trap for each victim.
Exactly. Think about the Tinder swindler, Simon Levere.
Oh, yeah. That documentary was wild.
That whole thing exposed how these scammers operate. He didn't just use a fake name. He built this entire persona, a wealthy diamondaire, jets, fancy hotels, bodyguards, the works.
And people bought it. He conned those women out of millions. I mean, it's hard to even grasp how manipulative someone could be. It's like something out of a movie, but with real consequences. And what really gets me is how fast these scammers go from zero to, I love you.
Oh, absolutely.
They shower their victims with affection. It's a total whirlwind romance.
That's a classic manipulation technique. It's called love bombing.
Love bombing.
Yeah, it's designed to speed up the emotional bond and make the victim's judgment cloudy.
That makes sense.
Victims. They often talk about being totally overwhelmed by the scammer's attention and declarations of love. It's like a fantasy, but a really dangerous one.
Yeah. Okay, so they build this intense connection, but then what? How do they actually get the money? I doubt anyone's just handing over cash because someone said, I love you.
You're right. That's when the emergency comes in. They'll invent some crisis that needs immediate financial help.
Got it.
Stranded overseas, a sudden medical bill, maybe a business deal gone wrong. They really tailor these stories to pull at your heartstrings.
Right, play on your empathy. It's almost like they're working from a script. I read about scammers pretending to need money for visas, saying their kid needs surgery, even making up stories about being held hostage. It's awful how they exploit good people.
It is. And that's why understanding how these scams work is so important. They target our natural instinct to help others, especially those we feel close to.
When we're emotionally invested.
Yeah, exactly. They know when we're in that state, we're less likely to think straight.
Okay, but how do they keep this going for so long? Wouldn't the victim eventually get suspicious?
That's where the sunk cost fallacy comes in.
The what?
The sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah.
It's this thing where we hesitate to give up on something we've already put effort into, even if it's clearly a bad idea. The more time, energy, and emotion you invest, the harder it is to walk away, even when doubts start to creep in.
So they're trapped, emotionally and financially.
Exactly.
Wow. I'm starting to see how people get pulled into this. You fall for this fantasy, and then it just gets harder and harder to escape. But what about red flags? There must be some warning signs people can look out for, right? So we've talked about how these scammers build these fake personas and use mind games to manipulate people.
Right.
But let's talk about those red flags you mentioned. What should people be on the lookout for? Because honestly, this is all pretty scary. It feels like anyone could fall for this.
You're absolutely right. Anyone can be a target, which is why it's so important to be aware of these tactics. And one of the biggest, most obvious red flags is a request for money.
Oh, yeah.
No matter how convincing the story is or how desperate the situation seems, never send money to someone you've never met in person. That is the golden rule.
Makes sense. But what about those cases where the scammer doesn't outright ask for money? I mean, they must have other ways to manipulate people, right?
Oh, definitely. They could be really sneaky about it.
Yeah.
Another major red flag is avoiding meeting in person.
Okay.
So if someone always has an excuse for why they can't video chat or meet face-to-face, that's a really bad sign. They might say they're overseas for work, dealing with some family emergency, or having technical issues.
So basically, if they're always dodging showing their face, that's a problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And pay attention to inconsistencies in their stories. Do the details they share about their life actually add up?
Right.
Does their work schedule make sense? Do they seem hesitant to talk about their daily life?
Okay.
These can be subtle clues that something's not right.
So it's like you're a detective looking for cracks in their story. What should you do if you notice these inconsistencies?
Don't be afraid to ask questions. A genuine person will be happy to clear things up and put your mind at ease. A scammer, though, will probably get defensive or try to change the subject. They might even accuse you of not trusting them.
Right, try to flip it around. But it's scary to think that some people might be so caught up in the fantasy that they'd ignore all those red flags.
It is. That's why it's crucial to talk to someone you trust if you have any doubts about someone you're talking to online.
Okay.
Even if it feels a little silly, getting an outside perspective can be really valuable.
Right, like a reality check.
Exactly. Sometimes just talking about your concerns out loud can help you see things more clearly.
Like having a voice of reason to break the spell. Okay. But let's say someone's already fallen victim to a scammer and they finally realize they've been tricked. What should they do then?
Well, the first thing is to cut off all contact immediately. Block them everywhere, change your passwords if you shared any, and gather any evidence you have of the scam.
Got it. Like messages, emails, anything like that.
Exactly. Messages, emails, transaction records, anything you can get.
Okay, so cut off communication and gather evidence. What about reporting the scam?
Absolutely. You should report the scammer to the platform where you met, like the dating app or social media site, and also report it to the authorities, like the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center or the FTC. Reporting helps track these criminals and prevent them from targeting others.
Right. And I imagine it can be really helpful for victims to connect with other people who have been through something similar.
Definitely. Connecting with others can be so healing. There are support groups and forums specifically for victims of romance scams.
Okay.
People can share their stories, offer support, and learn from each other's experiences.
That feeling of not being alone can make a huge difference. So we've talked about how to protect ourselves, but is there anything that can be done like on a larger scale to fight these scams?
That's a great question. And one of those most important things is education. We need to be talking about these scams openly and honestly so people understand the risks and how to protect themselves. These conversations need to be happening everywhere, in our families, communities, even in schools.
So it's about raising awareness, making sure people know this is a real threat.
Exactly. And we need to push online platforms to create safer spaces for users. Dating apps and social media sites have a responsibility to stop scammers from creating fake profiles and targeting people. That could mean stricter verification, better algorithms for detecting suspicious activity, and more ways for users to report scams.
So it's a combination of individual awareness and collective action.
Precisely. And law enforcement needs to make investigating and prosecuting these crimes a priority. Romance scams are often international, which makes them tough to pursue. But we need to send a clear message that this won't be tolerated. More cooperation and resource sharing between law enforcement agencies across the globe is really crucial here.
So we need a multifaceted approach. But beyond the practical steps, what about the emotional impact? How do we help people heal from the betrayal and trauma of these scams?
That's such an important point. You know, one thing that often gets overlooked is the psychological impact of these scams. Victims often feel ashamed, guilty, and blame themselves. They wonder how they could have fallen for it.
It's understandable to feel that way, but it's important to remember that these scams are designed to be super convincing and anyone can be a target.
Exactly. It's not a reflection of your intelligence or your worth. The shame belongs to the scammer, not the victim. And I think it's crucial to emphasize that seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness. The sooner you reach out for support, the sooner you can start healing.
Yeah.
Talk to a trusted friend or family member, seek counseling, or join a support group for scam victims.
It's like building a support system, a community that understands what you've been through.
Exactly. We need to create a culture of empathy and support, where victims feel safe coming forward and sharing their stories without judgment.
So we've talked a lot about the dangers of online romance scams, but I don't want this to scare people away from connecting with others online.
Right.
Online dating can be a great way to meet people and build relationships.
Absolutely.
It's about approaching it with awareness and caution.
You're right. We don't want to let fear paralyze us. It's about finding a balance between protecting yourself and staying open to new relationships.
Yeah.
The key is to stay informed, trust your gut, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Right. Be smart and savvy, not shut yourself off from the world.
Exactly. And if you're ever unsure about someone's intentions, there are tons of resources to help you navigate online dating safely. We'll include some helpful links in the show notes.
We've spent a lot of time talking about the tactics and the red flags and how to protect ourselves, but it's important to remember the human cost of these scams.
Absolutely.
Uh,
We've talked about love bombing and the sunk cost fallacy and all these ways they manipulate people.
mhm.
But what really hits home for me is that sense of betrayal the victims feel.
Mm.
It's not just about the money. Imagine having your heart stolen. It's a deeply personal violation.
Right. It's like having your trust completely shattered, not just in the scammer, but in your own judgment. I can only imagine how tough it must be to recover from that.
It is. And that's why it's so important to be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
If you've been through this, whether directly or indirectly, just remember, it's not your fault. These scams are designed to be incredibly convincing. Anyone could fall victim to them.
It's easy to play the blame game, but these scammers, they're pros. They're really good at what they do.
Right. They prey on our basic human needs, that desire for love and connection.
Exactly. So be kind to yourself. Let yourself grieve the loss and focus on healing and moving forward. And know that you're not alone. There are resources out there to help you recover and rebuild. We'll include links to some organizations in the show notes.
And you can always reach out to a trusted friend or family member for support. Just talking about what happened can be a huge step in healing.
Absolutely.
Right.
And if you're struggling, professional help from a therapist or counselor can make a big difference. Before we wrap up, I want to make one thing clear. While it's crucial to be cautious online, I don't want this conversation to make you afraid to connect with others
I agree.
or to close yourself off to the possibility of finding love online.
Online dating can be a wonderful way to meet new people and build relationships. It really can.
Hmm.
The key is to be aware and trust your instincts.
Hmm.
Real connection takes time. Don't rush into anything. Be patient, get to know someone, and never be afraid to ask questions. If something feels wrong, if their behavior seems off, just walk away. You deserve to be treated with respect both online and offline.
Well said. And if you're ever unsure about someone's intentions, there are tons of resources out there to help. Talk to a friend, a family member, or check out some of the organizations we'll link in the show notes.
Right.
Well, that's about it for our deep dive into online romance scams. We've covered a lot today, and I hope this has given you the knowledge and awareness to stay safe.
Yeah.
Remember, stay informed, trust your gut, and keep your heart open to real connection.
Until next time, keep diving deep.